Hello, welcome to Am I Neurodivergent? My unexpected autism and ADHD year. So, this week, this might be a bit niche and certainly won't apply to everyone, but I'm going to talk about something that for years, decades actually, I thought was just an embarrassing, shameful quirk of mine that I tried to keep hidden. That since getting a diagnosis, I now found out is really quite common with neurodivergent people, and that's persistent hair pulling or hair picking, also known as trichotillomania or trick for short, which itself is one of a collection of things that are grouped together under the umbrella term body focused repetitive behaviours, or BFRBs for short. BFRBs are a collection of, quote, psychological and emotional disorders that involve repetitive compulsive behaviours focused on the body, typically involving the skin, hair, or nails, including conditions such as hair pulling, nail biting, skin picking, or excessive scratching. Now, BFRBs are not exclusively a neurodivergent thing. They're often associated with anxiety, with depression, or linked to obsessive compulsive disorder. But much like when we talked about imposter syndrome, the incidence of BFRBs does seem to be very, very high as an additional pizza topping alongside neurodivergence, and very often presents as an outward manifestation alongside ADHD and autism. Once again, I started to find that one of many weird things I thought I had turned out to all just be different manifestations of the one thing, neurodivergence. So, if you have a body focused repetitive behavior you can't shake off or stop doing, and you're coming to this video through random suggestion with no connection to neurodivergence, I would, just for belt and braces, recommend you go take an autism or ADHD self-test, both linked in the descriptions below. See how you do, and then maybe go back and start at chapter 1 of this video series and work your way through. You may well have more going on than just random hair pulling or nail biting or skin picking or scratching. You might not be neurodivergent. Plenty of neurotypical people do this as a trauma or anxiety response. But yeah, take a couple of self-tests, have a think. But look, whatever your starting position, neurodivergent, anxious, traumatized, BFRBs left unchecked can lead to physical harm, such as scarring, infections, and other damage to the body. Extreme versions of more self-harming BFRBs that autistic people, often those with higher support needs, can sometimes adopt, can extend to hitting or banging your head or ears, slapping your face or nose, rubbing or poking your eyes, or hitting or banging your mouth or chin. Like most things neurodivergent, body-focused repetitive behaviours sit on a spectrum. So, confession, I'm a nail biter, I'm also a scratcher, but it's the hair picking, the trichotillomania in particular, that does me in personally and just drives me to distraction. Trichotillomania is the repetitive urge to pull out one's hair, leading to hair loss and distress. It's often classified as an obsessive compulsive or anxiety related disorder, and people can target hair on the scalp, the eyebrows, eyelashes, arm or leg hair, pubic hair, or what I've landed on, which is the beard hair or face stubble. Trick often manifests as an overwhelmingly intense urge to pull hairs out, and you can often experience growing tension and distress until you do it. After pulling the hair out, you often feel an intense sense of relief at having done so. And you can do this with fingers, you can do this with tweezers, same. The resultant bald patches sometimes have an unusual shape or affect one side of the head or face more than the other. It can become a kind of body-focused addiction the more hair you pull out, the more you want to keep doing it. And as good as it can feel doing it, I often berate myself after doing it or while doing it, when I kind of snap out of the trance and see the bald patch and go and hide my tweezers somewhere out of reach. And I swear never again, but 2 minutes later my fingers have gone back up to my face looking for the next hair to pull. Statistically, tricks more common in women than men, but it can affect anyone, and it can significantly impact your quality of life, primarily due to the shame and embarrassment and rotten self-esteem associated with what's basically self-inflicted hair loss. People affected often try to keep their condition to themselves and cover patchy scalps with hats or head coverings, or like me, if it's your beard hair, be clean shaven until the hair starts to grow back again, which, spoiler, it may well eventually stop doing. So what causes trick? That's the $1,000,000 question. We don't know. And much like a lot of this stuff that disproportionately affects neurodivergent people, not enough research has been done, and the potential causes are many. The best guess seems to be some kind of combination of genetics, environmental factors that may have caused trauma, depression, stress, or anxiety. It may be a person specifically turning inwards to self-soothe and calm a dysregulated nervous system. Your skin's obviously part of your nervous system. Or it could be neurobiology, such as an imbalance in neurotransmitters like serotonin or dopamine, and more of this last bit in a second. People can both pull their hair out in response to a stressful situation, or it may be done distractedly without really thinking about it. And that ambiguity of not knowing why I do this is really what's thrown me over the years in terms of being able to deal with it and stop doing it, even when I really, really want to. So, how can you stop doing it? Can you stop doing it? That's the second $1,000,000 question, right? Some people can and have. Some things might work for some people, other things might work for other people. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, can work for some. This helps individuals identify the triggers that lead to them picking or pulling hair and develop coping mechanisms or alternative anxiety-reducing behaviours or habits to stop or replace the picking. More simply, you can wear hats or hair nets as a physical barrier. Same for nail biting. You can put foul-tasting paste on your nails to retrain your brain from doing the behaviours. But I can tell you from experience, these tricks don't work for everyone. For others, meds like antidepressants, antipsychotics, and anti-anxiety medication might do the trick. Support groups, talking about it with others, meditation, yoga, exercise, deep breathing exercises, all of these can and might help. For me, I've tried a ton of things and none of them ever stuck. Sometimes I'd stop for a bit. I've even at times grown a full beard as a kind of challenge to myself, but I always start again and end up looking like a patchy-faced Egypt. When I've picked right off my cheeks down to my jawline, my wife tells, which I've kind of, it's not as bad as, but I look like a evil magician, according to my wife, and this is not an intentional look I'm cultivating. The reason I'm covering this quite niche aspect of my journey now is basically A, just to track my own personal journey of getting to grips with various aspects of my own neurodivergence, and B, not to be embarrassed or feel ashamed of stuff like this anymore, and just try and put it all out there and normalize the conversation a bit. Everyone's neurodivergent discovery journey will be a bit different, and mine goes down a few weird cul-de-sacs at times. The time period for me on my own journey here is roughly 3 months after self-diagnosing and about 3 weeks after getting a formal autism diagnosis. Week 15, like the chapter title says. Basically trying to get to grips with it all, and I'd started anxiety therapy for the first time, and this kind of came to the forefront first. I'll be honest, I'd always been quite snooty about therapy and thought it was a thing for other people, mainly Americans or celebrities or members of the royal family. But I was advised to get some after my diagnosis, and so I did. I'm not embarrassed to say I've been having some sort of therapy on and off ever since. I'm a massive convert now. I literally think everyone should get mental health therapy, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical. Everyone's got something going on that they could do with unpicking, so to speak. It's it's obviously a privilege to be able to afford to get some therapy. I recognise that, and I do think we need to get to a point where quality therapy is free at the point of use for anyone and everyone who needs it, but we're nowhere near that yet. Another thing I'll say about therapy, it can take a while to land on a therapist you click with, and sometimes you have to try a few before you hit a groove with someone that you feel gets you. The first therapist I started seeing, I'm sorry, I've got a really bad frog in my throat. I really apologise for my voice in this thing. What was I saying? The first therapist I started seeing, we initially focused way more on the anxiety bit than the autism bit of the two diagnoses I got following my ADOS. I'd realised in due course that it's damn near impossible to be on the autism spectrum and not have anxiety, but we're still early doors here and finding our feet. I threw an absolute ton at that poor woman whose first couple of weeks, in those first couple of weeks, because when you've gone decades with undiagnosed autism and anxiety and never really talked about any of it, you've got a ton of stuff to unpack, and any late diagnosed person who's gone through a similar late introduction to therapy will probably find a similar ridiculous pattern of, I'm very private and resistant and hesitant to share any personal details with a stranger. Oh no, wait, sorry, everything weird and frustrating about me over my entire life so far is now pouring out of my head and mouth with absolutely zero filter after less than one session. So I was throwing out repetitive daily routines, my loss of spontaneity, never feeling like I was able to stop and relax even when I was relaxing with my hobbies, super low frustration tolerance, inability to let perceived injustices go, churning and churning over things that were outside of my control and I could influence. And she absorbed all that, but the thing she landed on first to look at was this one aspect of my anxiety that was specifically noted in my ADOS write-up, and that was the persistent hair pulling, the trichotillomania. And like I said, I'd done this for years and years before neurodivergence or autism or ADHD were even on my radar as conditions I might have. My first memory of hair pulling was from quite young, primary school, I think, when I used to not like the way the hair on the crown of my head felt and started picking that out. My next memory was early adolescence, I think. I had a monobrow and got called Teen Wolf at school. Some kid said that their gran said people whose eyebrows meet in the middle can't be trusted or some shit like that. That I obviously took literally because autistic. So I started using tweezers to pull out the hair between my eyebrows, and which eventually stopped growing, by the way, after plucking them for most of my teens. So word of warning, if you're a hair picker, the hair can and might stop growing altogether if you pick it and damage the roots enough. when the wind changes, you might literally be stuck like that, however your bald patch looks at a given moment. Eventually I started on my beard and stubble, and I think I've been pulling my beard hair on and off for damn near 20 years. So yeah, that first therapist also told me very pointedly that what I was doing was self-harm. That felt pretty stark, but also kind of hard to dispute. I often pick at my face hair until the skin bleeds, and I'll have a wad of tissues to wipe away blood while I relentlessly pursue the root of a hair with tweezers. Maybe it's weird that I'd never remotely thought of that as self-harm before. I don't know. Same with scratching or pinching or rubbing at my skin. I went to try and get medical treatment for excessive scratching years ago, and they prescribed me anti-anxiety pills without any explanation of why, which I promptly ignored and didn't take because I thought they'd misprescribed the wrong medication for what I thought was just some sort of itching rather than just self-inflicted injuries that wouldn't heal. What they call an itch and scratch cycle. Years later, a doctor would tell Brick he had an anxiety disorder linked to autism. Anyway, so that first therapist fixed in on the picking as anxiety-based self-harm because my trichotillomania was listed on my ADOS readout as the primary manifestation of this additional anxiety disorder. And she set about trying to retrain my hands to go to a stress ball rather than my face. But here's the thing. I really didn't think it was just stress and anxiety. She went through all of my triggers, and yes, I'd often do it when emails started coming in thick and fast at work, or I had a deadline due to a meeting I was supposed to speak at. She was convinced it was anxiety, and it would be sorted out through stress balls and fidget toys. And those worked for a bit because I was concentrating really hard on making them work, but eventually I just went back to the face and left the stress ball alone. I also pick distractedly when I'm relaxed and watching TV. So it clearly wasn't just stress and anxiety making me do it. I don't think she really knew how to progress that, and we eventually went on to different things, but I think by then I'd kind of lost faith in her a little bit and ended up going on to someone new with more of a specific autism focus. So the second therapist thought it was two things. One, an autistic stim, and two, that led to harmful behaviour. So the stim, same as a plush toy or a comfort blanket or whatever, was that I liked the sensation of the hairs, the bristles of my stubble, because they calm my nervous system if I'm stressed. But then the autistic perfectionism kicks in, and if I felt like a hair felt too thick or too long or out of place on my face, I had to get it out, and the whole thing becomes a soothe, pick, remorse cycle. That kind of made sense, so I got a bristle brush that kind of felt similar, but again, I quickly fell out of the habit, and the need to search and pick always overwhelmed the sensation of just finding alternate bristles to search for. So none of that was really landing long term either. Eventually, and I'm jumping ahead in the chronology here, but it's relevant. A third therapist I saw months later eventually said very plainly, this is 100% ADHD. It's focus. You pick your hair to focus yourself because you need to concentrate on something that's boring, or your attention's consistently wandering away onto something else. And for me, that, after years of doing this, was a real penny drop moment, and she was convinced this was it. With ADHD, you often lack enough dopamine to consistently focus. The pleasure and pain of picking gives you that brief dopamine hit and brings you back into the present, into the room when you're drifting off elsewhere. That theory works both for the email barrages at work that I'd initially put down to a stress response. It was inability to focus and prioritize. So I'd pick to help me focus. And equally, when I'd absent-mindedly pick watching TV, it was usually because I wanted to watch whatever I was watching, but my mind was drifting off onto other things and I'd lose the thread of what I was watching. So I'd pick my face to help me focus and bring my thoughts back into the moment, and then throw autistic repetitive behaviours in the mix, and we've got a face like a plucked chicken day and night. I think since I've realised, for me, that the hair picking's not necessarily stress, it's not necessarily anxiety, it's a body-focused repetitive behaviour response to loss of focus and drifting attention, it's been a bit of a revelation. I won't say it's better. You can probably still see my stupid bald cheeks, but it's not been wildly out of hand for some time either. I've had periods in my past where my entire chin or the entirety of one side of my face has been completely bald from picking. But since realizing, for me, it's focus. When I catch myself looking for hairs to pick now, I think, why are you overwhelmed? Where are your thoughts going? Concentrate. If there's too many tasks, break them down, chunk them. What's the smallest thing you can do first? And alternatively, if I'm picking because I'm trying to watch a film or TV show, but my brain's drifting off elsewhere, I'll make a quick note on my phone under things to come back to and park it and push my brain back to the show, back to the here and now. And slowly but surely, I'm getting my response to overwhelm and loss of focus away from face picking and onto other things. It's not perfect or fixed yet, but it's broadly getting better. So yeah, that's my face picking story / confession. Thank you for sticking with it if you have. I'd be really interested to hear your BFRB stories or tips or techniques in the comments below, or if you want to email me, am I neurodivergent at gmail.com. I'm particularly interested if anyone suffered with trich or other BFRBs and started taking ADHD meds. I'm not taking any meds for ADHD, but it is something I'm considering. If you pick or bite or scratch or pull, have ADHD meds helped? Made zero difference? Made it worse? I'm conscious there's not any one size fits all solution for these sort of things here. So I'm really interested in hearing other stories for what's worked or not worked. Okay, yeah, bit of a niche one this week. Thanks for sticking with it if you have. If this has been vaguely helpful or useful in terms of trich and hair pulling and what might be causing it, or what might be some of the reasons that might be causing it, and you want to keep seeing my channel, please do subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video, and as always, thanks for listening, and see you next Sunday for more of my journey rambles. Cheers.